Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I am very excited to have Barber-Nichols in the room with me. But before we jump onto that conversation, I do need to ask our audience out there to please visit cobrt.com. You can sign up for our newsletter while you're there. Check out our events page. We have the 6th annual legislative reception coming up. That is a free event that's going to be on November 12th, so be sure to sign up for that as well. And you can find all of our shows under the media tab, radio/podcast. So we'll go ahead and get today's show started. I have in the room with me Dan Thoren and Matthew Malone, both with Barber-Nichols. How are you doing, Dan?
Doing well, thank you.
Yes, and how are you doing, Matt?
Absolutely fabulous.
Fabulous. Oh, I love hearing that. So, Matt, we were just talking a little bit off air. You have an upcoming Ironman.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I typically do about 2 or 3 a year. This year I did Lake Placid early in the year and qualified for Kona again this year, which is the World Championships in Hawaii. So yeah, heading out tomorrow morning to compete on Saturday. So looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I start with that because I do want to hear a little bit about your background and who you are and how you got on board with Barber-Nichols.
Yeah, so I grew up always knowing that I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. There was no question. I was taking apart lawnmowers at 4 years old, and my parents knew something was wrong. But I ended up going to Penn State for school after that. I was in the honors college there, studied mechanical engineering, and did my other side of the degree was in entrepreneurship. And I've really dabbled in that area forever, inventing outside of work, coming up with unique ideas and actually make them reality. So I love the application of knowledge. After Penn State, I joined GE on their leadership program, went through the engineering development program at GE, fantastic opportunity, saw all the different sides of the business, as well as was really able to get some domain depth in turbo machinery, which is rotating machines. After about 8 years, I started to ask myself, quickly moving up to this large organization, do I want to be here long term or not? And honestly, I started to look up at the leadership and say to myself, can I put myself in these folks' shoes and really want to thrive in this environment? At which point I decided that that wasn't my long-term career path. So I reached out to Barber-Nichols during a ski trip while I was out in the mountains out here in Colorado, which I came out 2 or 3 times a year and just absolutely loved, and convinced myself that maybe a career move was the right option. So I had a good connection with Greg Forche and Mike Forche, discussing some opportunities. I came out about 2 weeks later and interviewed, had an offer later that day. And then Dan was sending me text messages to try to stimulate my interest in some of the rocket engine industry, which is where I've really had my initial growth at Barber-Nichols. And then in the last 2 years, I've really focused on growing the repeat side of the business, which is a lot of the contract manufacturing and more non-engineered product. And having a large contribution. It's the one side of our business that's growing extremely rapidly. And, taking an ownership position in the company has been great because it has really fulfilled that entrepreneurship spirit that I have. So overall, that's pretty much how I've gotten to where I'm at with Barber-Nichols.
Fantastic. So I was actually surprised when you said that you took some classes for entrepreneurship. That's not typically something that I hear coinciding with engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So congratulations that you found that entrepreneurship side. When you do go to a smaller company, it's more all hands on deck, right? Rather than following with the big guys and just you have your 10 to do items for the day. And then you go home, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Dan, so you pulled this guy in. Obviously, you've been at Barber-Nichols for quite a while. So tell me a little bit about yourself, your school career,
Sure.
And how you forced Matt, right, to come on board.
Well, I grew up in Colorado and Wyoming. I went to the University of Wyoming, started in accounting, and said, maybe not. So I went into mechanical engineering. Really enjoyed that. Had a couple of internships down in Phoenix at a company called Garrett Turbine Engine Company. And after I graduated, they offered me a job, so I went down there and worked. I was there for, 3 years, and I kind of like Matt. I kind of felt like, boy, this is a big company, and I don't know if I'll fit in here long term. So I started looking for a smaller company, found Barber-Nichols. They didn't have any openings, so I just kind of hung out and kept pestering them. And they invited me in for an interview when they finally had an opening, gave me an offer, and I joined. So I started as a mechanical engineer, became a project engineer, eventually became engineering manager. And then one day they lined everybody up and they said, "Who wants to be president?" Everybody stepped back but me.
Now, were you aware that was happening? Everyone was going to step back on you?
No, it was something that I was actually very interested in. I like leadership. I had started at the University of Colorado, Denver, towards a master's in organizational management. So this was on my career path. So I pursued that, and they let me run the company. And honestly, for the first 5 years, I had no clue what I was doing.
Do any of us?
No, I don't think so. So you do what you can do. You learn as much as you can. I joined, at the time, it was a group called TEC, the Executive Committee, small business kind of CEO roundtable, where you learn about, what other companies do and how they do it and all of that. It was a great experience for me. I got a lot of real world experience from other people's successes and failures, and really enjoyed that piece of it. So I first 5 years didn't know what I was doing. After that, really started to learn, and since 2002. We've been on a roll. It's been an amazing ride. We've been growing at like 10% per year in revenue, wow. And so after 17 years, you go, gosh, is this really sustainable? We think it is, and a lot of it comes from hiring really good people like Matt. So when he came and interviewed, I heard lots of great things from him. I talked to him on the phone. And tried to get him to come join us, and he did, and he's been a great contributor since, and he'll become a great leader for us in the future.
Fantastic. Now, tell me, Matt, just going back, I know that you looked at GE's leadership when you were there, and you maybe some things just didn't fall in line for you, but knowing that you have leadership opportunities here at Barber-Nichols, I imagine that influenced your career path a little bit.
Yeah, so to look back at GE, the biggest thing for me was I come to work in a lab coat and not a suit. My lab coat is, I love the environment where it's really about the technology and the people thriving as opposed to kind of the outside perception. I think it's a foundation that's built on complete transparency, and it's really built on this engineering prowess where people are really proud of what they do. And the thing that I love about Barber-Nichols in that regard is the application of technology and true engineering. It's like really at its finest. If there's a problem that comes up, whether it's on the manufacturing side, HR, you name it, we're taking this kind of pragmatic sort of engineering-based approach to solve it. And it's really collaborative, which I really enjoy. On the leadership side, the biggest thing is, GE definitely built the principles for sure. I was able to travel the world and really learn about myself and become comfortable in that self. And then having the ability to apply that at Barber-Nichols has been really rewarding. And the biggest thing is just seeing the people thriving, number one, with the feedback in leadership. And then two, just seeing how every single person is such a valuable contributor in an organization. It's really fulfilling.
I imagine that it is really fulfilling. When we talked about big company versus smaller company, I think you feel like just a cog sometimes with the bigger the company gets. And not to knock any of those major companies, they're obviously doing something right. Sure. But that being said, I actually like a home at a small company as well for the fact that I do feel appreciated, right? And you mentioned transparency, which I think is a key thing that we're going to see more and more of with businesses, particularly in Colorado. I think that's a huge theme that we're seeing. But let's talk a little bit more about Barber-Nichols and who they are. I'm going to start here with you, Dan, and talk to me a little bit more about the transparency and how you've shifted it as a company in your tenure there.
So I'll start with historical.
Yeah.
So it was founded in '66 by two engineers, and a business run by engineers tends to be totally technical and less business, right? So they started out with consulting engineering, and they really enjoyed it. They were established engineers. Their company had moved away. They said, "Hey, we're staying," and so they did consulting engineering for various people. People then said, "Hey, would you make this stuff since you've designed it for us?" And so they went outside. They got the parts made. They brought them inside. They assembled them. They tested them and then delivered them. And after a while, they said, why is it that we're outsourcing the manufacturing? Why don't we bring manufacturing in? So they brought manufacturing in, and so they went from consulting engineering to job shop type work to specialty pumps and turbines and compressors. And it was always a pretty advanced company. And so when I joined in 86, they were doing things that as a much larger company we were doing. And I was just blown away coming in and kind of seeing the advanced capabilities. They were running pumps and compressors faster than 3,600 RPM. So they were working with the very, very first variable frequency drives and just doing things that people weren't doing yet. So it was a really cool environment to come in. That continues today. We're really doing advanced type things. And there's a lot of satisfaction in working on new problems, new technology, those types of things. So it's a great place. So we've gone to really specialty turbo machineries, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But as we kind of evolve, we go from consulting engineering to job shop to specialty machines to now integrated systems. And so we're bringing on the next generation of really high thinkers, people that can kind of think at a bigger and bigger level to help us develop brand new things, more system-based products that will help us grow in the future.
Fantastic. High thinkers. I like that term. I'm gonna steal that from you.
Sure.
No, I imagine Matt is one of those high thinkers. And how long have you been there again, Barber-Nichols?
4.5 years.
4.5 years. All right. So walk me through what you've seen growth-wise at Barber-Nichols since you've been there.
Yeah, so when I first joined Barber-Nichols, I saw a very engineering-centric organization. What you'd see is kind of the consulting engineered product, as well as kind of a dabble in maybe the contract manufacturing. Typically the contract manufacturing's large kind of integrated systems like Dan mentioned, like we'll talk about later, but an example of that would be an air turbine pump for a submarine. Where I've seen the majority of the growth is on the organizational side, the support for these programs, the compliance that's required to execute these programs, as well as the manufacturing front and gaining an expertise there. We don't just design products anymore. We offer a service in most regards where we're designing for an application need for another customer. With that being said, now we're able to offer things cradle-to-grave, where it's really a full integrated solution as opposed to just the engineering solution. So we would go everything from clean sheet design, which is a paper that says we want it to do this, all the way through analysis, release drawings, 3D models. Actually, now we fabricate the majority of components in-house. We have a vast supply network. And then in addition to that, we do assembly and test and then start all over again. So it's very cradle-to-grave focused as opposed to kind of engineering focused.
Interesting. I want you to go a little bit more in depth on that for me. So cradle-to-grave versus an engineering. So engineering typically comes in only on one aspect of things. Is this kind of where you're going with that?
Yeah, so it's really the idea of full cycle ownership. Okay. So as opposed to just owning the engineered portion of it, like designing the bottle, you would actually then go and fabricate the bottle and then watch it go through testing. And so it's a much more kind of holistic ownership of the product through the entire life cycle. And it's not just, the life cycle doesn't end when the product's delivered. It's looking at service data. It's looking at a whole bunch of things out in the field, how it's operating, what are the pitfalls, how can you improve them? And then, of course, it feeds back into the engineering cycle for optimization. And what you see as a result of that is your folks start to really understand how things interact with each other. So if you're manufacturing the product, you're now thinking about that in the manufacturing phase. We work with a lot of folks where they just live in the engineering world, and then we have to go try to manufacture their product. Well, it's not manufacturable. So I think having that kind of cradle-to-grave mentality, it really facilitates kind of a comprehensive, optimized solution as opposed to just a cobble it together kind of solution.
Yeah, I love that. So was there an inspiration to start taking this vision on moving from moving from just an engineering perspective to a cradle to grave? Obviously, you mentioned 2002. You've had 10% growth since then. Was that coinciding with bringing this perspective in on that?
Oh, very much. As a consulting engineering firm, just like any other consulting business, you go through cycles. And so the best engineers that you have are often your best salespeople. They sell a job, then they start working it, they forget to sell. And so you go through these ups and downs, right? And so many years ago, we said, we really want to get away from that. We want to get into product that has repeat potential associated with it, such that we can make them over years and build this base of business that's product-based. And then let the engineering cycles, which will always be there, run on top of this base of business. And so our business really has grown, as Matt said, on the repeat manufacturing side. And that's really the part of the business that Matt's running right now. It's a big, growing piece of our business.
Yes. So globally speaking, are you finding other consulting engineering or other manufacturing firms following suit in this, or is this kind of you've made your own niche market here?
Go ahead.
My biggest feedback on that is, yeah, a lot of folks are going there. And the reason why is because we're getting a lot more focused kind of niche sort of manufacturing environment or engineering environment where they're able to kind of take over a larger scope and do it well. Mm-hmm. And so no longer are the big behemoths that can keep the others away staying away. The little guys that do the niche really, really well are able to kind of thrive in that whole environment. And so I think you're starting to see really fast transition from a sort of kind of one area of expertise to something a lot more cross-functional.
Yeah, absolutely. So I imagine you're probably going to have some competition coming up with this, right? As we see other firms, any ideas implemented, at least that you can share with the public, right? Don't give away your secret sauce by any means. But anything that you're seeing the foresight of to make sure that you are retaining these projects.
Yeah, so as I look strategically into the future, what we're trying to do is continue to vertically integrate. So as Matt kind of characterizes it as cradle to grave, we want to add more and more value throughout that value chain. So we get involved more and more at the front end when our customers are thinking about systems, and we're talking to them about how our product could fit in there, and we chase that all the way through, all the way to service, overhaul, kind of the full life cycle of those types of products. As we grow into more and more sophisticated systems, we're running into more and more competition. I feel very comfortable there, though, that we're still very competitive. We saw in the last DoD budget cycle down during the Obama administration.
And that's Department of Defense, for those that
Department
don't know.
of Defense, yes, exactly. So we saw defense budgets kind of squeezed, kind of crunched. And the big primes essentially came further and further down the supply chain to offer more and more product. As a small business, we have lower overheads, we're faster, we're more nimble, and so we tend to beat them in that middle market kind of area. But certainly, it's as we grow, we're growing into more and more competition, and so we have to get better. We talk a lot about continual improvement. And the need to get better and better every day. And that's honestly what will make any business successful is continual improvement, getting better and better every day.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Department of Defense, so I'm sure there are some people that are curious on why that was big for your market, right? One of the things that you guys work on a lot is the aerospace industry as far as manufacturing for aerospace. Those are two huge industries that Colorado Business Roundtable, we really take a lot of time to work on public policies and things like that for both of those industries. So talk to me a little bit about how manufacturing and aerospace really go hand in hand, and especially, as we know, Colorado is the number one per capita for aerospace, being the number one industry.
Yeah, so what we're starting to see is a lot going on in the aerospace industry, and I'll kind of converge that with general aerospace as well as the rocket engine industry, which we're pretty heavy into.
No worries.
Yeah, so where we're really seeing that stuff take off is the first thing is moving away from sort of government-driven programs in a lot of cases. So there's the commercialization of a lot of, let's say, the rocket industry. You're starting to see NASA becoming a guiding agency as opposed to the actual implementer. So the opportunity to work with some pretty fast-moving companies like openly disclosed Virgin Orbit, we're able to actually have a dialogue about that company and the fact that they're moving faster than anyone's moved before. So the quick turnover, the implementation of additive manufacturing, things that really speed up the development cycle into more of a, what they call it is design, test, fail, and then fix. It's kind of this iterative cycle that's much more analysis based, but not so-called rooted in analysis. And what's happening is you're moving through this cycle very, very quickly. On the aerospace side, it's kind of the same parallelism where you're starting to see these really, really unique applications, but it's essentially just power density is the way we look at it. Everything's getting smaller, more sophisticated within a smaller package. And in parallel, the requirements are becoming more stringent, both on the paperwork side as well as on the actual product side. And what I mean on the paperwork side is you're now having to make sure that CUI, which is this sort of controlled or uncontrolled information, you need to make sure that you're housing it properly. So it's not classified, but you need to make sure that you're housing it properly. Also, the quality documentation is becoming legally binding in a way that it hasn't in the past. So there's a substantial push in this arena, not only towards making the product physically, but also providing the proper documentation.
Exactly. So along the lines of NIST compliance, maybe?
Yep. So NIST compliance on the CUI side for sure.
Okay. Fantastic. That is something I recently learned about myself. So I've been getting into that. It's a fascinating subject for sure. We only have a few minutes left here in the first segment. I want to talk a little bit about currently what you guys have going on, a few projects. Whatever you can speak about. I know those contracts are always a little bit binding when it comes to media, but anything you'd like to share about current projects that you've got going on?
Sure, just a potpourri of stuff. Matt had talked about rocket propulsion, so we've been involved with rocket engine turbo pumps for many, many years. And we continue to be involved in that. It's exciting. It's a lot of fun. It's very enjoyable, both from engineering and manufacturing perspective. We do Department of Defense type work. We have equipment on submarines, and that's a lot of fun also to work there. We work with locally CSU, Colorado State University, on some Department of Energy type jobs where we're looking at heat recovery types of applications. We work with automotive companies on waste heat power systems. We do a lot of work in cryogenic pumps. A lot of these pumps end up going into physics research facilities around the world, and that's really fun to be part of also. We get involved in crazy things like supercritical CO2 as a replacement for water in power systems. They also use it in decaffeination of coffee. They use it in dry cleaning. And more recently, they use it in supercritical CO2 in CBD oil extraction, right? So we get involved in a whole wide variety of crazy things. More recently, the really cool job that we just won was with NASA, It was for their exploration portable life support system. So it's the backpack that the astronauts wear when they're doing extra vehicle activities. And so we'll be making an oxygen blower that goes in that backpack that supplies the oxygen to the astronauts. So yeah, a wide variety of fun stuff.
I love that. That is awesome. Gosh, I have so many questions. I might get those off air from you guys. We're going to take a quick break here on Connect and Collaborate, so stay with us. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. You can find more information about Barber-Nichols in the description below, so be sure to click on that link. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, having a fascinating conversation here with Dan Thoren and Matthew Malone of Barber-Nichols. So we took off in the last segment talking about the current projects that you guys have going on, and I'm fascinated once again by those backpacks with the oxygen in it for the astronauts. And one thing that I did ask you off air, but I wanted to reiterate here for our audiences is how long these projects go on and how long that you have these guys under contract for. So walk me through a little bit about these projects and how that works.
Yeah, so as Dan just mentioned, kind of talking through a program, I'll give a few kind of flavors, but the first one would be we have programs that go from initial concept literally in 3 months. That's where they come in with something, hey, we want to just get on paper a rocket engine turbopump concept. And we could actually move to kind of a 3D sort of model or 2D layout in 3 months. So really, really quickly. Kind of the more conventional program is more along the 18-month kind of cycle, and that's typically where it would come in somewhat engineered. We'd put the final engineering touches on it, release a drawing package, then manufacture a product. Those can move through pretty quickly. A laser cooling application or a laser cooling pump is kind of in that window. If you look at the backpack, the oxygen fan for the NASA backpack, that typical program, it can move through engineering relatively quickly. Actually in kind of the 6 months to a year kind of time frame to get something on paper, and then production will start. The key there is becoming more the long-term stable kind of business, so that business could evolve into something over, let's say, 10 years if the full program was realized. And then more the contract manufacturing, the DoD work, those come in 5-year blocks. So what you'll see there is we'll actually get a drawing package supplied to us, and we'll provide that full package, and it will last for 5 years. Now, the typical thing there is you want to win the follow-on based on the previous performance. So those could last 30 to 50 years if you produce well.
Okay, fascinating. Well, you have all of these projects, right? And these are contracts that are lasting. You're focusing on more repeat business. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about employees. Right?
Sure.
Workforce development is something that the Colorado Business Roundtable really advocates for. It's something we're very passionate about, and Colorado is number 6 in the nation for the lowest unemployment rates that we've seen in the history of the United States. That being said, every person that I've had in here, across industries, having a hard time finding the right employee. Particularly though, and blue-collar jobs doesn't necessarily have a nice connotation to it. So I like talking about these jobs because, one, it doesn't take a whole lot of education to get there. It's typically just a certification, right? And there's a lot of on-the-job training that goes on when you look at these jobs. That being said, talk to me a little bit about your plans that you have right now for how you retain good employees.
Yeah, so I might back up a little bit.
Yes.
Further back than that, and kind of talk about machinists and technicians. They're a huge part of our business. They are really, really important contributors to our business. And in the early 2000s, when we were seeing all this offshoring of manufacturing, we kind of lost a generation of machinists and technicians, right?
Yeah.
And so we looked at that and we got scared because we saw our employee base of kind of 50-year-old machinists and no one else coming, and we're going, we are in trouble. So we saw that relatively early and decided to make a pretty proactive move to try to make that better for us in the future. We had talked to Warren Tech and Red Rocks Community College, and they had a precision machining program. It wasn't really robust. It really wasn't all that exciting. But we got involved with them because we said that's going to be really important for our future. We learned a lot in all of that process, and we learned that young people tend to, between 7th and 8th grade, they tend to make this decision. Do I want to work with my hands? Do I want to, kind of be more of a trades type person? Or do I want to be an academic-based kind of a person going into a career that's involves college and all of that? And so we found out that it was really early that kids made those decisions, and so we basically are inviting kids from Warren Tech into our shop and showing them around and saying, here's what a career in manufacturing or technician looks like. So we started putting money into the Red Rocks Community College endowed scholarship program. We basically started to sponsor kids going through that program, and thought that we would be priming the pump, if you will, getting kids into the trades, having them move into local shops, and once they had 5 or 10 years of experience, we could hire them, right? It turned out not to be that way. It turned out that kids today have amazing capabilities in computers and modeling, and they build stuff on computers all the time. So they come out of a Red Rocks Community College precision machining program with better computer skills than a lot of us do. Right?
Yeah.
So what you have to teach them then is the feeds and the speeds and those things associated with machining, the different materials, the different tools, all of that. So we thought we were going into it one way and we're coming out a totally different way, where we're hiring kids right out of Red Rocks Community College, and they're coming in as junior machinists for us, and they're really, really good.
Yeah, they're rocking it, I imagine.
They are.
Yeah. So one of the things you talked about in the last segment was that you hung around Barber-Nichols until they had an opening. Yeah. Right? You were waiting for that. It's not the case anymore. You guys are consistently hiring, considering how much growth you've got going on, right? So tell me now, instead of hanging around Barber-Nichols until you come out and offer me the job, how do I get involved? What do I need to do? What's my process here? What do I need to get on the floor, whether it's machinist, technician, or on the engineering side? What are you looking for when it comes to an employee?
So for me, I'll start, and then Matt can add to that. We start with internship programs, and so we're rolling out a brand new internship program this year that will bring in people from the trade side, from the engineering side, from the business side, and start to give people exposure to our company. But ultimately, what we end up looking for is people that aren't afraid of kind of stepping out there on their own. In a small business, it's really tough to hide, right? And so you really have to be engaged and excited and really feel a confidence about what you want to do. There's so many opportunities in our little company, and as we grow, there's continuing to be opportunities, and it's so it kind of takes that person that's really excited and wants to make a difference. I think I came from that fold. I think Matt comes from that fold. We're seeing young machinists coming out of Red Rocks Community College that want to make a difference. And if that's what you want to do, they fit pretty well in our company.
Fantastic. Yeah,
and I would add on to that by saying, in a small company, 125 to 130 people, every single person matters. And the way that we kind of show respect to that is when we have a company event, it is every single person in the company invited and every single person contributing. And that's hugely impactful, because what we realize is the products that we manufacture, design and manufacture, they really take every single person. When you look at a Mark 48 torpedo program, which is out in the public as well, that takes every single person in the organization. So that's one of the key areas, is seeing the application of the stuff that you're designing. What I'll say kind of on the employee side, what we're always looking for is a job description is obviously somewhat generic. But if we're looking for a machinist, it's an active learner, someone that can pick up speeds and feeds, but has really, really critical focus on the details of their job. We're working on precision materials, or I would say abstract materials with very precision tolerances. So they need to be able to actively learn in that environment. The other thing is, our business thrives on folks that come in with kind of that proactive problem-solving methodology. And whether it's on troubleshooting a machine that's down for 5 minutes, kind of self-troubleshooting it, or even figuring out how we're going to potentially hire the next best person. Any area that we look at is someone that's coming with solutions to solve the problem, as opposed to just coming with complaints. So I think that's an area where we're really looking as we bring in the next wave of folks.
Yeah. One of the themes that I see across the board when it comes to the manufacturing and engineering space is a lot of breaking down of silos within companies, which I think is key in order to maintain and thrive into the future. So that being said, I imagine that anyone that you hire, you both have said it, you want them to be able to work in all systems. You want them to see the entirety of their project, even though they're only working on the one piece of it. So talk to me a little bit about your values as Barber-Nichols, and what people should know if they were going to apply with you guys, what you strive for as a company to maintain for your employees.
So I'll start with a couple, and then Matt can follow up. Continual learning is a big piece of it. Matt hit that, but it's we are not in a stagnant environment. Things are changing all the time. We've got to continue to learn, get better, figure out, solve problems. So continual learning is a big piece of it. This relationship piece is also extremely important. So we talk about collegial relationships, and that's with fellow employees, with customers, with suppliers, all of that. Anymore, you just can't force your will on anybody. It really has to be this working together environment where relationships drive your success. So when we talk about project managers, their relationship with the customers is extremely important. Our operations group, their relationships with our supply chain is huge. Then within the company, just department to department relationships is huge. If you can't work with other people, you just won't be successful in today's day and age. So relationships and continual learning would be two big ones for us.
Yeah. Interesting that you say relationships are so important despite all of the technology we have that keep us on computers and communicating that way, but I like it.
Yeah, and I really want to hit on this breaking down silos. It's been one of my key focuses at Barber-Nichols, and I think it's had a game-changing impact, truthfully. So one of the things that we focused on in the last year is co-locating teams and having defined teams with clear expectation and roles. And so what you'll see is we now have a program manager that's coupled with a planner that's putting the stuff through production, a purchasing representative that's actually buying the outside material, not only the raw material, but also the actual components. You also have a technical engineer that's responsible for making disposition decisions on non-conforming material or resolving drawing discrepancies. What we've started to add to that is the manufacturing side. So actually bringing in the manufacturing engineer, the machinist, down to the technician, and having a team that really understands the priorities that are being cascaded from the customer, because then two things start to happen. You can actually solve problems as a team. The communication substantially improves between that team. They start being open and transparent in that communication, not only internally, cross-functionally, but also with the customer. So as an issue comes up, say on a component where we have a non-conformance on material, the actual machinist has enough presence in the program to be talking directly to the customer. So it facilitates this kind of empowerment and teamwork mentality that I think has been lost in a lot of organizations with tall, skinny silos.
Yes, absolutely.
Long way to go, but I will say the improvement that we've seen is already pretty substantial.
Wonderful. I like hearing that because it's not easy to break down those silos, but once you see them get fatter and shorter, it gets easier to hop those walls, right?
Yep.
Yeah, as a result of it too, you start to see this sort of team accountability, which becomes self-accountability, and everyone asks, how do you hold people accountable? Well, you don't. But naturally what you start to see is, as it has a team environment, the team starts to hold each other accountable, and you start to see the deficiencies. You start to build on people's strengths, which we've helped try to identify. You also start to expose others' weaknesses, but then they become an opportunity to help the team grow. So it stimulates an environment that's really kind of productive and efficient.
Absolutely. There's one thing, we have a monthly show with a local catering company, and what he talks about is creating a great place to work. And one of the big things that he talks about is sometimes you hire the wrong employee and you figure that out down the line. I'm sure you both have run into that situation at one point or another, but the further you break down the silos, as you said, the easier it is to see where the glitches are, and there's always an opportunity to say, okay, you know what, maybe this isn't the best place for you here at Barber-Nichols, or maybe we can find ways to improve what you're working on.
Yep.
Yeah, love hearing that. Matt, you were pretty passionate on our break here, wanting to talk about workforce development. Talk to me a little bit more about why that's such a passion for you in general.
The people are our business, period. That's the reason. I can honestly tell you, in a small company, every single person matters, and every person has to be trained, develop to be able to bring out their maximum. And I always look at that as, how do you bring out people's potential? So I call it potential in motion, and it's really setting those people in motion. And what you see is, when you're able to pick out key people's strengths and really utilize those strengths, you start to see something really unique happen. It's this grassroots kind of effort where everyone's kind of on board and has a bucket, and all of a sudden you're no longer drowning. You're starting to actually get proactive with decisions. And it really comes down to every last employee. And I can just go through a few examples right now that's really home to me. Is we're making a liquid oxygen clean room for the rocket engine space. And I look at how that thing's coming together. It's a grassroots effort because we had foreign object damage potentially, let's say, that could get into a product. We don't want that to happen. We've got folks that are putting together the room. We have other folks that are ordering the materials to make it happen. We have others that are clearing out on the weekends. It's kind of this whole kind of camaraderie and teamwork around it. And you're starting to see what in two weeks is going to be a clean room. So it's all these kind of little examples where people just step up, and when you're able to kind of see the vision for them sometimes and put their potential in motion. So workforce development in all regards is number one on my list because the people are number one. And what we see is an extremely niche technical business, whether it's on the manufacturing or the design side. It's very hard to kind of develop those skills. But if they have the base, kind of the foundation, you can certainly start to help grow that.
Fantastic. You kind of started in on the theme of projects that you've got going on. You mentioned the clean room, so I'm going to follow along that trajectory there. It's part of the great foresight that is Barber-Nichols. So talk to me about these projects. We mentioned in the last segment the commercialization of Aerospace, which is freaking fascinating, to put it quite bluntly. It's very cool to see NASA being this guiding light, as you said, and less so on the forefront of getting those projects out there. So talk to me a little bit about some of the projects you've seen coming from the commercial side and the differences in working with private companies versus the government projects. And again, what you can say.
Yeah, so I've got a real kind of cut to the chase example.
Okay.
So the typical kind of, let's just say NASA design cycle in a rocket engine turbopump could be 5 years. It's typically many millions of dollars, and it's typically very analysis driven on pretty strict standards. And what happens as a result of that is you get to the actual test environment and you realize that some assumptions that were made were incorrect, and they start to kind of jeopardize the whole framework of the design. Where folks are moving now is to a much more analysis quick, build quick, test quick, fail fast. And then they're getting into this iteration cycle where they're able to really quickly move through this development cycle. And where we were used to seeing 5 years kind of development cycles, we're seeing 1 to 2 years. And this is literally flight-ready hardware.
Yeah.
You're starting to see major risks being taken, but calculated risk. And that's why I like the risk. It's very sort of rooted in fundamentals of physics-based analysis, where rocket engine companies are using additive manufacturing to produce parts in days as opposed to castings, which took months. So you're starting to see kind of these pragmatic decisions being made to accelerate this development cycle. And the biggest thing that I would say, the biggest difference really is that acceleration through risk management. It's very pragmatic, it's less bureaucratic, and what I would say is it's working. It's moving fast. They're failing fast, but they're failing in an environment where they can learn and adapt. So, yeah, it's real.
Yeah. Thoughts, Dan?
Generally, I would agree with Matt that everything's moving a lot faster. There ends up being quite a bit of pressure on people too, as we try to move faster. And so as a business, you can feel your markets wanting to move fast. And so as a company, essentially what you want to do is be able to have the pieces in place that enable that. So people are a huge part of it. Processes are another huge part of it. We like to think that what we do is unique every time, but in reality, you can put a process around a lot of very prototypey type applications, and you can do them better and faster and make less mistakes if you do that. So as a management team, what we're tasked with is trying to put into place those processes and procedures that give people a roadmap without crushing the creativity. And it's a fine balance, right? Because you want people to go fast and do things as well as they can, understand the risks, and make the right decisions based on the risks that they're seeing. And they kind of need a framework to do that. And as a management team, that's one of our tougher challenges is kind of threading that needle, getting the right stuff in place without killing the creativity.
Ah, awesome. One thing that you both mentioned was the speed of how quickly things need to be turned around. Risk management, you talked about the calculated risk. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, safety, right? With the privatization, and SpaceX has had sometimes a little bit of bad press around certain things, right? So let's talk about mitigating those safety risks.
Yeah, so cut and dry, the quality and safety requirements don't change.
Okay.
Period.
Thank you.
There's no negotiation there. It's the products that were 20 years ago that were slow, so to speak, they had the same quality requirements as today. And actually, I would say that those quality requirements have escalated because the ability to inspect has improved. The detailed inspections that you can do now are on a less than a hair of size. So you're starting to see what's happening is you're starting to be able to get information quicker and ensure that you can meet the quality and safety requirements. So I would say that those remained unchanged. And in our business, quality is the number one most stringent focus. We are certain to not ship a product unless everyone is nodding their head that we believe it meets the quality requirements. And I mean this. in today's world, the paperwork that's associated with a product is as critical as the product itself. We have to ensure that they both are in tandem and working together. So I don't see a shift there. The risk is much more, when I say calculated risk, it's much more on we realize that these things can happen and how can we mitigate them. For example, let's be open. In the space industry, if liquid oxygen and rocket propellant collide, then you have an explosion. So explosion's fine if it's in the right domain, but getting to those kind of situations faster and facilitating the learning process, but no jeopardization on quality and safety.
Yeah, every day we talk about safety, quality, delivery, cost in that order. And everything has to be safe to begin with, then quality, then delivery so we don't mess up our customers, their projects, and then cost is the fourth. But it's in that order.
I like that. Safety first always. I'm a big
Yes.
believer in that as well. So gentlemen, where can I find more information about Barber-Nichols?
Well, we're actively hiring in a lot of different regards. I will say we're very pragmatic about how we hire because every hire is critical, but barber-nichols.com. We also have email, but Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time today. Once again, you can find more information about everything we talked about in the description below. Apply for a job today at Barber-Nichols. And be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. You can find all of our past shows at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.